I never thought I'd be telling this story. In fact, for the longest time, I couldn't bring myself to even think about it. But now, after everything that happened, I've come to realize that the only way I can find peace is by sharing it, hoping it might save someone else from making the same mistake. It all began in the summer of 2015. I was a young, ambitious professional, eager to explore the world and expand my horizons. The allure of a foreign country, a chance to work, live, and experience something completely different, seemed like the opportunity of a lifetime. I had just received a job offer from a multinational company that required me to relocate to a country halfway across the world. It was a dream come true. Or so I thought. At first, everything was perfect. The company had an excellent reputation, the city was modern and thriving, and the people were friendly. I moved into a high-rise apartment in the city center, filled with excitement about my new life. The office was just a short commute away, and I quickly made friends with colleagues who were also newcomers, just like me. They made me feel welcome, and we often spent evenings together, exploring the city's bustling streets, sampling local cuisine, and chatting about our experiences. But things started to take a strange turn about 3 weeks into my stay. One evening, after a long day at work, I went out for dinner with a colleague, Samir. He had been in the country for a few months and had settled in well. He was a seasoned traveler, always sharing stories of his adventures in different places. Over dinner, he casually mentioned that I should be careful when exploring the city at night. There are certain areas you shouldn't go to, he said, his tone dropping low. Not even by mistake. At first, I laughed it off, thinking he was just being overly cautious. But Samir's eyes grew dark, and he leaned in closer. "I'm serious," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's something you don't know about this place. A lot of people have gone missing. Locals, foreigners. It's not something they talk about, but it happens." I could tell by the way he spoke that he wasn't joking. But at the same time, I couldn't wrap my head around it. I asked him what he meant, but he quickly changed the subject. The rest of the evening was normal, but Samir's words lingered in my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about what he had said, but I tried to shake it off. After all, this was a city of millions of people. Surely, he was exaggerating. The next week, I found myself walking home late from a dinner meeting. I was still thinking about Samir's warning when I noticed something strange. A man, dressed in ragged clothes, was standing at the corner of the street. He was staring at me, his eyes wide and unblinking. As I passed him, I felt a chill run down my spine. There was something unsettling about him, but I brushed it off, telling myself it was just my imagination. However, the next few days only made me more uneasy. I began to notice strange things happening around me. People whispering in hushed tones when I walked by, a sudden feeling of being watched even when there was no one around. The atmosphere in the city, once vibrant and full of life, began to feel oppressive and suffocating. I tried to keep a brave face, but something was off. One night, I was walking back to my apartment after work when I saw a group of locals gathered in a dark alley. They were speaking in low voices, and their eyes were all fixed on something in the shadows. I couldn't make out what it was, but my instincts screamed at me to leave. As I turned to walk away, I noticed a man in the crowd looking directly at me. His gaze sent a jolt of fear through my body. I quickened my pace, almost running back to my apartment. The next day, I met Samir for lunch, and I couldn't hold back anymore. I told him about the strange things I had been experiencing, about the feeling of being watched and the man in the alley. Samir listened intently, his face growing pale. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "It's not just the city. It's the people here. There are things that they don't tell you. The government, the police, they all turn a blind eye. You have to be careful, especially after dark." I pressed him for more details, but he hesitated. Finally, he gave in, lowering his voice even further. "There's an old myth," he began, "about a secret society that runs things behind the scenes. They take people, foreigners and locals alike, people who disappear without a trace. They're not just ordinary criminals. There's something else. People have claimed to see strange things, things they can't explain. Some say they perform rituals, sacrifices." I laughed nervously, thinking Samir was just trying to scare me. But the fear in his eyes was undeniable. I decided to stay cautious, but I didn't believe him. Not yet. Things took a darker turn a few days later. I received a phone call at work from a colleague, Julia, who had been one of the people I had grown close to since arriving. Her voice was frantic as she spoke. "You need to leave, now. They're coming for you." I was taken aback. "What are you talking about? Don't ask questions," she continued, her voice trembling. "Just leave the city. Go to the airport. I'll explain everything later, but you have to go before it's too late." I didn't understand, but I could hear the genuine fear in her voice. Something inside me told me to listen. I excused myself from work and rushed back to my apartment. As I walked through the empty streets, a sense of dread washed over me. It felt like the city had changed overnight, quiet, eerie, and suffocating. When I reached my apartment, I saw something that made my heart race. The door had been tampered with. It wasn't completely open, but it was ajar, just enough to make me feel like someone had been inside. My hands shook as I grabbed my things and rushed out. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get out. I arrived at the airport later that evening, breathless and terrified. As I stood in line to check in, I noticed a man in the crowd, standing far away but watching me. His eyes locked onto mine, and I could feel a coldness in his gaze. My heart pounded in my chest as I quickly made my way to the gate, trying not to look back. When the plane took off, I finally allowed myself to breathe. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I kept thinking about the things Samir had said, about Julia's warning, and the strange events that had unfolded. I didn't know what had happened in that city, but I knew one thing for sure: I had escaped something sinister, something that I could never fully understand. It's been years since that night, and I still don't know exactly what was going on in that city. I've heard rumors, heard stories from other foreigners who went there and never returned. Some say it's just a conspiracy, others claim to have seen strange figures in the shadows. I don't know if it was the work of a criminal organization or something much darker, but I'll tell you this: there are places in the world where you should never, ever go. And if you ever find yourself in a foreign land, and something feels wrong, don't ignore it. Don't dismiss it. Don't make the mistake I did. Don't go, even by mistake.